Before the God of the Bible was known as Yahweh, the world already followed countless other gods. They ruled over storms, harvests, fertility, and war. Their names were carved into stone, feared in myth, and worshipped in temples. But the God of Israel did not rise from this world of idols. He rose against it. He did not blend in with the divine systems of ancient cultures. He stood apart, challenged every false claim, and revealed himself as the one true and eternal God. This is not the story of one God among many. This is the unveiling of the God who existed before all others were imagined, the one who shattered the illusion of man-made gods and demanded exclusive worship, not out of pride, but because he alone is real. If you're ready to see the Bible's oldest God in a way you've never seen him before, stay with us. Like this video to help others discover it. Comment below and share what challenges or enlightens you. Subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. And share this with someone searching for what's real, because the God who shattered idols then is still unveiling himself today. Long before the mountain of Sinai quaked with divine fire, long before the sacred tetragrammaton, Yichwap, was whispered in trembling reverence, the ancient world teemed with gods. Theirs was a world where the sacred and the natural were inseparable, where every thunderclap echoed with divine power, and every harvest was a gift from the heavens. These deities were not mere superstition to the ancient mind. They were real, present, and powerful. From the life-giving Nile worship through Ra and Osiris, to the astral pantheons of Mesopotamia ruled by Anu, Enlil, and Ishtar, the ancient Near East was a spiritual ecosystem saturated with divinity. Marduk, the champion of Babylon, defeated chaos to bring order. Baal, the Canaanite storm god, brought rain to a parched land. Each god had a domain, a mythos, a temple, and a people who depended on them for survival. And yet, among this divine multitude, there arose a peculiar people, Israel, who dared to claim that their God was not merely one among many, but the source of all things. But this revelation did not come all at once. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was revealed progressively. Emerging from the heart of a deeply polytheistic world, Israel's earliest spiritual landscape was not empty, it was crowded. The patriarchs lived among gods. The Israelites came out of Egypt, a land of idols and magic. They settled in Canaan, where high places were filled with sacred poles and stone altars to Baal and Asherah. The challenge for Israel was not atheism, it was discernment. In a world where gods were everywhere, how would they come to know the one true God? To understand the mystery of the Bible's oldest God, we must first enter this world of divine plurality, not to affirm it, but to see the backdrop against which Yahweh was revealed. The Bible does not ignore these gods, it engages them, confronts them, and in doing so unveils a God unlike any other, one who is not shaped by human hands, not confined to one region, not appeased by bribes or rituals, but who seeks covenant, justice, mercy, and truth. Thus begins the great unveiling. The mystery of the Bible's oldest God is not about tracing him back to the first temple or the first myth, but about watching him rise above them all, exposing every idol, confronting every false claim, and revealing himself, not as the newest God, but the eternal one, the one who was and is to come. To unveil the mystery of the Bible's oldest God, we must begin with a name inscribed not only in Scripture, but also in the shattered tablets of Canaanite lore, El the Most High. In the pantheon of the ancient Canaanites, El reigned supreme. He was no storm slinger or warlord. He was an aged, bearded patriarch seated upon the throne of heaven, El Elyon, God Most High. As father of gods and men, El was not known for rage or destruction, but for compassion, judgment, and cosmic order. He was the divine architect of the world, sovereign over the celestial council, whose decrees shaped both fate and fertility. Texts from Ugarit, a coastal city in modern-day Syria, reveal a vivid picture of El's rule. He presided over 70 divine sons, allocated nations to their care, and maintained the structure of the cosmos. His wife Asherah and their divine offspring filled a heavenly court, mirroring earthly kingship. And then, in the Hebrew scriptures, we hear echoes of El, not merely as a foreign god, but as a name used for Israel's own God. Deuteronomy, chapter 32, verse 8-9, speaks of Elyon dividing the nations and assigning Yahweh to Jacob's portion. Genesis, chapter 14 describes Melchizedek as the priest of Elyon, blessing Abraham in the name of the Most High God. The Psalms too sing of Elyon as Israel's defender. This overlap is no coincidence. It reflects a transitional moment in Israelite theology, a time when Yahweh was understood not in isolation but in continuity and contrast with the gods known in surrounding cultures. Some scholars suggest that early Israelites may have equated Yahweh with El, or saw Yahweh as a distinct but exalted member of El's divine council. But this would not remain the final picture. The mystery begins to unfold here. Yahweh does not merely resemble El, he transcends him. As Israel's covenant deepened, Yahweh absorbed El's roles: creator, judge, shepherd, sovereign. But he added something the Canaanite El never offered: intimacy. El was distant, enthroned above all. Yahweh walked with Abraham, wrestled with Jacob, burned in a bush for Moses. He was not only most high, he was most near. Thus Yahweh did not dethrone El by violence or myth. He fulfilled and redefined what God Most High meant. The ancient title El Elyon was not cast aside, but woven into the tapestry of revelation. In Yahweh, the lofty abstraction of El became the living, covenantal presence who called his people by name. This is the first great unveiling, that the Bible's oldest God, though cloaked in the titles of ancient deities, revealed himself to be unlike them all. Not one God among many, but the one who would rise above every name, not just as El, but as I am. If El was the father of gods, then Asherah was their mother, the divine feminine force of the ancient Near East. Revered as the Queen of Heaven, she embodied fertility, nourishment, and generative life. Her image appeared beside the thrones of chief gods across Canaanite and Semitic cultures, where she was often portrayed holding lilies or flanked by lions, symbols of strength and fruitfulness. She was not a distant deity. Her presence was felt in the rhythms of the earth, in the womb, the harvest, the sacred tree. Asherah poles, wooden symbols of her presence, stood on hilltops and beside altars throughout the land. Groves were planted in her name. In Ugaritic texts, she was called She Who Walks in the Sea, consort of El, mother of 70 divine sons, and intercessor among gods. But the mystery grows more unsettling when we turn to the biblical record. Archaeological findings, particularly inscriptions at Kuntilat Ajrud, an 8th to century BCE desert outpost, contain references like Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah. These texts suggest that in certain Israelite circles, Asherah was not merely remembered from Canaanite mythology, she was worshipped alongside Yahweh. This wasn't a minor fringe belief. The presence of Asherah poles in Judah and Israel, even within or near temple precincts, points to a time when syncretism blurred divine lines. Yahweh, the God of Israel, was imagined by some not as a solitary transcendent being, but as part of a divine pair, echoing the male-female cosmic unions seen across surrounding religions. Yet the biblical authors violently resist this confusion. Prophets like Jeremiah condemn those who offered cakes to the Queen of Heaven. Deuteronomy, chapter 16, verse 21, explicitly forbids planting any Asherah beside Yahweh's altar. Kings like Hezekiah and Josiah launched religious purges, tearing down her poles and burning them to ash. The prophets declared Yahweh to be utterly indivisible, exclusive in glory, and incompatible with any consort, be she goddess, idol, or imagined symbol of fertility. In this rejection, a mystery is unveiled. Yahweh is not simply different in power, but in nature. He does not mirror the divine pairings of El and Asherah, Baal and Anat, or Marduk and Ishtar. He is complete in himself, the sole creator, not birthed by heavens nor needing a partner to give life. The mother goddess may have been venerated as the origin of many, but scripture declares a radical truth. Only Yahweh gives life, and he does so not through sacred union, but through divine will, holy breath, and covenantal promise. In Asherah, we see the seductive pull of blending old gods with new revelation, but in Yahweh, we encounter a mystery greater still, the God who transcends gender, myth, and form, revealing himself not in divine romance, but in eternal, sovereign holiness. Among all the deities that crowded the spiritual landscape of ancient Israel, Baal stood as Yahweh's fiercest rival. To the Canaanites, Baal was not a minor god. He was the divine storm bringer, the rider on the clouds, and the master of rain, thunder, and agricultural bounty. In a region where survival depended on seasonal rains, Baal was not just myth, he was necessity. He was the son of El in Canaanite mythology, yet far more dynamic and aggressive. Myths from Ugarit recount Baal's epic battles against Yam-Se and Mot Death, cosmic foes representing chaos and desolation. In defeating them, Baal earned his place as Lord of Life and Fertility, the one who tamed chaos and made the land flourish. Temples dedicated to him, such as the Great Sanctuary in Ugarit, were centers of elaborate rituals, sexual fertility rites, and sacrificial offering. But as Israel entered Canaan, Baal's worship didn't vanish. It enticed. The Israelites, facing drought, famine, and foreign influence, were often tempted to hedge their spiritual bets by appealing to Baal, seeking rain not from heaven but from habit. Baal worship crept into Israelite towns, homes, and even palace politics. This idolatry came to a dramatic climax in 1 Kings chapter 18, when the prophet Elijah confronted 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. There, before a watching nation, the question was clear: if Baal is God, follow him. But if Yahweh is God, follow him. The prophets of Baal danced, shouted, and slashed themselves from morning till evening. But there was no voice, no fire, no God. Then Elijah, with one simple prayer, called upon Yahweh, and fire fell from heaven, consuming the offering, the stones, the water, and the altar. It was more than a miracle. It was a revelation. The contest between Yahweh and Baal was not merely about rain or fire. It was about truth, about which God was alive and which was legend. Baal, the storm god of carved stone and fading myth, could not answer. Yahweh, the invisible and covenantal God, not only answered, he revealed himself in power. This was the great unveiling. Baal had myth, Yahweh had presence. Baal had story, Yahweh had voice. And so, in that blazing moment on Mount Carmel, the mystery of the Bible's oldest God pierced through the smoke. He was not a God of seasonal storms or ritual ecstasy. He was the God who speaks, the God who hears, the God who is. In the religious imagination of the ancient Philistines, Dagon was a foundational figure, the god of grain, harvest, and prosperity. His name is likely derived from the Hebrew word Dagon, meaning grain, and he stood as a symbol of agricultural abundance, stability, and survival. As a provider deity, Dagon was revered not through thunder or fire, but through the quiet rhythms of seed time and harvest, the very elements on which civilizations depended. Dagon's worship extended far beyond Philistia. He appears in ancient texts from Ebla and Mari, long before the time of the Judges. In coastal Philistine cities like Ashdod, he was honored with great temples, standing as both political and spiritual protector of the people. But then came a moment of confrontation, one of the Bible's most dramatic yet understated theological statements. In 1 Samuel chapter 5, after Israel suffered a crushing military defeat, the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred vessel of Yahweh's presence, was captured and brought to the temple of Dagon. It was set beside the statue of the Philistine god as a war trophy, a symbolic gesture of dominance. But Yahweh does not sit beside rivals. The next morning, Dagon's idol was found face down, prostrate before the ark, an image of submission. The priests restored him to his pedestal, but the following day, Dagon fell again, this time broken, with his head and hands severed at the threshold of his own temple. No priest spoke, no prophet cried out. Yahweh didn't utter a word. His presence alone declared the verdict. This silent, shattering moment unveiled a deeper mystery, that the God of Israel did not need battle cries or thunderbolts to assert his supremacy. He overthrew idols by his mere existence. Dagon, though revered as the god of provision, could not stand beside the one who gives life not only to crops, but to creation itself. While Dagon's hands and head lay scattered, Yahweh's ark remained whole, untouched, unchallenged. It was a quiet triumph, yet more profound than any clash of armies. In that moment, Yahweh revealed that he does not simply defeat gods, he exposes them as false. In the fall of Dagon, the veil was lifted again. Yahweh was not a regional deity or a seasonal giver of grain. He was the God whose presence topples kingdoms and breaks every idol that dares to rise beside him. This is no local God. This is the Ancient One, before whom every false throne must collapse. Even after witnessing Yahweh's unmatched power, whether in fire from heaven or idols broken in silence, the hearts of Israel often remained divided. The deepest challenge to Yahweh's identity was not only the presence of rival gods, but the merging of his worship with theirs. This phenomenon is known as syncretism, the blending of beliefs and practices from different religions into one. In ancient Israel, syncretism wasn't rare. It was rampant. High places were built where altars to Yahweh stood beside poles to Asherah. Sacred groves were dedicated to fertility goddesses while sacrifices were still offered in Yahweh's name. Prayers to Baal for rain were uttered on the same lips that recited the Shema. The Israelites didn't always reject Yahweh. They simply added other gods alongside him, seeking blessings from all directions. But to Yahweh, this was not innovation, it was betrayal. The 10 Commandments had spoken with clarity, "You shall have no other gods before me." Exodus, chapter 20, verse 3. This was not a request for priority, but for exclusivity. To blend Yahweh's worship with pagan rites was not seen as harmless. It was spiritual adultery. The prophets cried out not just against false gods, but against the corruption of true worship. Why did syncretism persist? Because the people feared drought, war, infertility, and wanted guarantees. If Baal brought rain, if Asherah gave children, if Dagon protected grain, why not honor them just in case? But Yahweh is not a God of just in case. He is not one piece of a spiritual insurance plan. He is the jealous God, not in insecurity, but in covenant love. To mix the sacred with the profane was to defile the very identity of the Holy One. The mystery unveiled here is sobering. The greatest threat to the worship of the Bible's oldest God was not always open rebellion, it was compromise. Yahweh was not simply fighting foreign idols, he was reclaiming his people's hearts from diluted devotion. And so, throughout Israel's history we see a divine pattern, not of coexistence, but of confrontation. Yahweh consistently calls his people back, not to updated religion, but to pure allegiance. For only when he stands alone, without rivals or additions, is his true nature revealed. Not as one God among many, but as the one and only. As the worship of Yahweh unfolded in the midst of a polytheistic world, one theme resounded louder than any other through the mouths of the prophets. Idolatry is the great betrayal. More than a violation of law, it was a rejection of relationship, a turning away from the living God to embrace illusions carved from wood and stone. The prophets did not whisper. They thundered. Isaiah mocked idols as blind and mute. They know nothing. They understand nothing. Half of the wood he burns in the fire. From the rest he makes a god, his idol, he bows down to it and worships. Isaiah chapter 44 verse 9 to 20. His sarcasm was sharp, but his warning was deadly serious. Idols were not simply useless, they were dangerously deceptive. Jeremiah, filled with anguish, spoke of the foolishness of trusting objects that must be carried because they cannot walk. Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 5. He exposed the irony of calling upon gods who could neither hear nor help, neither judge nor rescue. They were silent in suffering, absent in war, and empty in power. Throughout Scripture, from Moses to Malachi, from Psalms to prophecies, the verdict is unwavering. Idols are lifeless. They are the works of human hands, fashioned from gold, silver, clay, and imagination. They reflect our fears, project our desires, and offer the illusion of control. But in the end, they lead to slavery. The condemnation is not rooted in anger alone, but in divine heartbreak. Yahweh, the covenant God, is not just offended, he is betrayed. Idolatry is adultery. To worship a false god is to exchange truth for a lie, glory for dust, and eternity for emptiness. And so the mystery is unveiled again. The God of Israel is not one of many. He does not tolerate rivals. Not because he is weak, but because he is holy, and because he alone is real. All other gods are masks, shadows of longing and fear, but Yahweh is the light that exposes them. He is not made by hands. He is not confined to a shrine. He cannot be carried because he carries us. This is the foundation of the Bible's fiercest warnings and most tender pleas. Return to me. Forsake your idols. Know me as I truly am. For only in turning from false gods can the oldest and only true God be revealed. Not as one option among many, but as the living presence, who alone is worthy of worship. To uncover the mystery of the Bible's oldest God, we must look not only to Scripture but also to the dust beneath ancient stones. In recent generations, the spade of the archaeologist has become a powerful witness, not against faith, but in affirmation of it. Across the ancient Near East, ruins whisper truths that the prophets once thundered. At sites like Tel Dan, Lachish, Megiddo, and Ugarit, layers of history reveal a world steeped in syncretism and religious compromise. Broken idols, ritual vessels, and cultic installations stand as silent testimony to a struggle that unfolded not just in hearts, but in households, cities, and sanctuaries. In the remains of Israelite homes, archaeologists have unearthed figurines of Asherah, often tucked into domestic altars, suggesting her worship wasn't confined to public shrines but woven into daily life. Clay amulets, fertility symbols, and inscriptions referencing Yahweh and his Asherah have been discovered in places like Kuntilat Ajrud and Khirbet el-Kam, pointing to a season when the people blurred the line between Yahweh and Canaanite deities. Altars to Baal, standing stones used for cultic rituals, and household gods buried beneath floors reveal not isolated moments of idolatry, but a culture of divided worship. These artifacts are not contradictions to the biblical record, they are its echo. They verify that the warnings of the prophets were not poetic exaggerations or spiritual abstractions. They were responses to real threats, to practices deeply entrenched in the very soil of Israel. Far from undermining the Bible, these discoveries validate its voice. They provide a historical backdrop that magnifies the mystery. Yahweh was not introduced into a vacuum. He entered a world already crowded with gods and demanded absolute allegiance. The stones cry out what the scriptures have declared all along. Israel's God was different, and his people were continually tempted to forget that difference. But even in their unfaithfulness, Yahweh remained faithful, calling them back again and again to the truth that he alone is God, not of the artifacts of man, but of eternity itself. To unveil the mystery of the Bible's oldest God is not merely to trace origins, but to witness revelation in motion. Yahweh did not descend fully defined into Israel's earliest consciousness. In the beginning, he was often perceived through the lens of the ancient world, a God of thunder, fire, and high places, a divine warrior who shattered Egypt's gods and thundered from Sinai. He was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yet to each generation he revealed a different facet of his being. In the Exodus he appeared as deliverer, in the wilderness as provider. On Sinai he was lawgiver, and in the conquest, commander of heavenly armies. In moments of rebellion, he was judge, but in exile, he became hope. As Israel's journey unfolded, through covenant, kingdom, collapse, and return, so did Yahweh's self-disclosure. He was no longer understood merely as a tribal deity who fought for Israel, but as the God who formed the nations, the creator of heaven and earth, and the redeemer of humanity. This progression was not evolution in essence, but revelation in relationship. From the storm at Sinai to the still waters of Psalm, chapter 23, Yahweh's identity expanded beyond divine power to divine intimacy. He was the shepherd, the rock, the husband, the father. Not abstract titles, but relational truths. And then in a mystery deeper still, Yahweh, who once spoke from fire, would speak in flesh. The God who walked in Eden, who wrestled Jacob, who filled the temple with glory, would one day walk among men, not as a new God, but as the eternal one unveiled. This unfolding is not a contradiction, it is the core of the biblical narrative. Yahweh was never limited to one name, image, or age. He revealed himself progressively, not because he was changing, but because he was drawing his people closer to the fullness of who he is. Thus the mystery is revealed. The God of Israel began as a presence among many, but ended as the one above all, not confined to tribe or territory, but enthroned as Lord of all creation. One of the most mysterious and often overlooked elements of the Bible's portrayal of God is the concept of a divine council, a heavenly court or assembly of spiritual beings who operate beneath God's authority. In glimpses scattered through Scripture, we see not a solitary throne in heaven, but a celestial courtroom, alive with voices and presence. In Psalm chapter 82, we are told that God stands in the assembly of El, he judges among the gods. The Hebrew term used, Elohim, can refer to spiritual beings, implying that Yahweh is rendering judgment over other gods, rebuking them for injustice and declaring their eventual downfall. In Job chapter 1, the sons of God B'nai Elohim gather before the Lord, beings who appear to have access to the divine presence and take part in heavenly deliberation. Even Satan, the accuser, appears as one who moves among them, submitting ultimately to Yahweh's sovereignty. To the ancient reader, this wasn't shocking. In Mesopotamian and Canaanite thought the universe was governed by assemblies of gods, each with roles and ranks. The biblical narrative does not entirely reject the idea of a divine assembly. It reframes it. Yahweh does not sit among equals. He sits above them all, not as a member of the pantheon, but as the King of Kings, the sole source of authority in both heaven and earth. This divine council, then, is not evidence of polytheism, but of a spiritual hierarchy. Angels, archangels, seraphim, cherubim, and other sons of God who serve, announce, and enact the will of their Maker. These are created beings, not rivals. They operate at Yahweh's command, bound by His decrees, never challenging His throne. And herein lies the unveiling. Yahweh's supremacy is not proven by isolation, but by preeminence. He presides not because He is alone, but because He alone is uncreated, eternal, and sovereign. The divine council reveals a spiritual realm rich with order and intelligence, but only one voice speaks as final. Only one name rules without peer. This glimpse beyond the veil reminds us, the God of Israel is not merely the highest among gods. He is the source of all divine order, the one before whom every throne, earthly or heavenly, must bow. Among the most misunderstood attributes of Yahweh is this profound declaration, I am a jealous God. Exodus chapter 34 verse 14. To modern ears, jealousy may sound petty or insecure, but in the scriptures, divine jealousy is not born from fear, it flows from fidelity. It is not selfish possessiveness but covenantal passion. Yahweh's jealousy is the fierce fire of love that will not tolerate betrayal, not because He is weak, but because His love is pure and exclusive. Just as a husband refuses to share his bride, or a parent cannot bear to see their child in danger, Yahweh burns with holy zeal when His people turn to idols that enslave, deceive, and destroy. This covenant jealousy is not rooted in domination but in protection. He alone can give life, truth, and freedom. To worship another is to drink from a poisoned well, to chase a shadow while turning one's back on the light. His anger is not the rage of a tyrant. It is the grief of a wounded lover, the justice of a faithful king whose people have abandoned their vow. Throughout Scripture, this divine emotion is tied to covenant faithfulness. In the wilderness, when Israel made the golden calf, Yahweh's jealousy erupted, but so did His mercy. In the time of the prophets, when Israel chased after Baal and foreign alliances, He wept and warned and pleaded. His jealousy did not lead Him to discard His people. It led Him to pursue them. Again and again, Yahweh's wrath is described not as cold judgment, but as love aflame, a fire meant not to consume His people, but to burn away their chains. Here, the mystery of the Bible's oldest God is unveiled in stunning clarity. He is not distant, detached, or indifferent. He is the God who loves too deeply to share, too holy to be compared, and too faithful to let go. His jealousy is not a flaw. It is the heartbeat of redemption. For every time His people stray, He comes for them. Yahweh is not one among many suitors. He is the covenant husband, the relentless redeemer, the one whose love is as fierce as it is eternal. To truly grasp the mystery of the Bible's oldest God, we must do more than read sacred texts. We must listen through the noise of rival voices. The Bible did not emerge from a spiritual void. It was written in a world where gods were many, temples were everywhere, and divine claims competed for human allegiance. The scriptures are not abstract theology. They are revelation in conflict. The God of Israel revealed Himself not in calm neutrality, but in confrontation. He stood against Baal in the storm, against Dagon in the temple, against Moloch in the flames. He shattered idols, overturned traditions, and thundered through the words of prophet. The biblical narrative is not just about who God is, it's about who He is not. Each false god unmasked highlights Yahweh's otherness, His holiness, His justice, His unmatched fidelity. Understanding the gods Yahweh opposed, their myths, their symbols, their seductive power, does not weaken faith. It sharpens it. It shows that Yahweh was not a borrowed idea or a regional upgrade, but a radical interruption in the ancient world. He did not rise from the ashes of myth. He burned through it. This historical and theological awareness deepens our understanding of Yahweh's uniqueness. It reveals that his call for exclusive worship is not arrogance. It is truth in a world of illusion. His demand for covenant loyalty is not cruelty. It is love resisting corruption. And so, the mystery unveiled is this: Yahweh is not merely ancient, he is eternal, not shaped by myth, but the one who shapes reality itself. He is the God who enters history, dismantles false systems, and reveals a holiness utterly unlike the gods of men. To know him rightly, we must see the battle he fought, to not just be known, but to be known as he truly is. Though the names Baal, Asherah, and Dagon may have faded from modern altars, the gods they represented have not vanished. They've simply changed form. Today we do not burn incense in sacred groves or kneel before carved images in the city gate, but idolatry remains alive, dressed in subtler disguises. Modern idols do not demand rituals, they demand loyalty of the heart. We bow to success, chase fame, cling to security, worship pleasure, and elevate the self as the final authority. In a world saturated with screens, brands, and personal ambition, the human heart still does what it has always done: exalt created things above the Creator. We may think idolatry belongs to ancient temples, but Scripture insists otherwise. The Apostle John's final warning to believers echoes across the centuries: little children, keep yourselves from idols. 1 John chapter 5 verse 21. This plea was not for pagans, it was for the church. It reminds us that idolatry is not primarily external, it is spiritual misplacement. The mystery of the Bible's oldest God is that he still demands what he always has: exclusive devotion. Anything, no matter how good, that replaces him becomes a rival god. And just like the idols of old, these modern gods overpromise and underdeliver. They offer identity, but breed anxiety. They promise freedom, but enslave. They claim to give life, but drain it. To uncover Yahweh's supremacy today, we must not only study the idols of history, we must confront the idols within. For the call of the true God remains the same: you shall have no other gods before me. Not because he is threatened, but because he alone gives life. And like those ancient statues toppled in silence, every false god we trust will one day fall, leaving only the eternal one, the God who was and is and forever will be. Yet through every age one truth remains unshaken: Yahweh does not compete, he calls. Not as one God among many, but as the only one who truly is. The same God who shattered Dagon's image and silenced Baal's prophets still speaks today, and still demands our undivided devotion. The idols may look different now, subtle, sophisticated, and acceptable, but their power to deceive is unchanged, and the call of Yahweh is just as urgent. Return to me, know me, worship me alone. The mystery of the Bible's oldest God is not about relics or ruins. It is about a living presence still confronting falsehood, still breaking chains, still calling his people home. If this message stirred something in you, do not let it pass like a passing thought. Share this with someone who longs to understand the God who truly is. Let your voice join this unveiling. Like this video if it brought clarity, comment below, and share what resonated with you most. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. And if this truth moved you, pass it on. Let others see the God who stands above every name. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeking truth. And may the Lord who was and is to come draw your heart ever closer to his.